I'm not one of them. You've made it difficult to live up to what I believe, and that is what God says to do, and that's to forgive. You are forgiven, sir.
All right, guys. It's been a while. I think I did like, I don't know, 3 or 4 messages in a week, and that was like a month ago. That there was a man that was forgiving the Green River Killer for killing his daughter. Now, you might say, well, I'd never forgive someone who did something like that. And look, the bottom line is when God says that you have to forgive, it means you don't let this bitter, angry root consume you from the inside out and make you sick. That you just let it go, that you forgive. You do it by faith. Everything in the economy of God is done by faith. I mean, I go out there every day in the work I do and I have to take it by faith. And, you know, Pastor David will tell you most of the time I'm pissed off. But when all is said and done, because I don't like that end of the day nonsense, it's straight stupidity. I hate that. Pretty much I hate anything that everybody does. You know, like, even as a little kid, I was never one that was like much of a follower. You know, I mean, maybe one time in my life, I actually bent to peer pressure. And the stupid thing, it was over a girl, right? And I actually liked the girl, but I was in middle school, and all these jerkwad friends of mine were making fun of me for making out with this girl at this dance. You know, I was like 13, 14 years old, and they were acting like that because they weren't getting any. But I pretty much broke this girl's heart. This little girl's heart. We were the same age. We were both in elementary school, or middle school, not elementary school. It was in middle school, 7th grade. And I liked her. But because of peer pressure, I let her think that I didn't like her. And that was just straight stupid. But I'm saying that to say this now. After that situation in my life, I began to change. I no longer would bend to peer pressure. You know, I've heard Pastor Charles. He did it. He told about it when we wrote these mainstream articles about all these crazy people were robbing trains and smoking and drinking, and he didn't do any of that. And they probably looked at him like he was a square, but he didn't care. I had the same type of attitude after this situation. And the reason I had the same attitude is I actually liked that girl. I liked her, and I let her think I didn't like her. Stupid. So anyway, I remember my mom always told me too about never to do drugs, you know, because my father had struggled with being an alcoholic and a drug addict. And you that know the story, my father was a gangster. He was a gang member, and he died when I was a child, and that's when God called me. But so there's certain things that I would never bend to, like peer pressure. So I never did the drug thing. I didn't drink a little bit with McLean and Thomas and some of my buddies, but I never was a big time alcoholic or anything like that. You know, I didn't always wear the most fashionable styles, as you all can see. I mean, I'm just like, I am what I am. It is what it is. I'm just like, whatever. So, but the point I'm trying to make is anything we do has to be done by faith. You know, the mainstream world, they're going one way. The wisdom of this world, they're literally traveling downstream. An easier road, right? But to serve God, you gotta go against the grain. You gotta literally swim upstream. I'm talking about unforgiveness because that's something that could eat you up inside. You know, there could be people that are angry at me and they let it just build up inside and I know nothing about it. That's crazy because if you knew me, anybody that would know me would know that I wouldn't want someone tormenting themselves like that. I'd want to make it right. Whatever I did. I know I could act like a jerk. I know I could say things that just totally piss people off and hurt their feelings, and I don't even do it on purpose. I just got that abrasive personality. You know, Christianity's not grinning like an imbecile. Oh, I love you, brother. I love you. But they don't love you. That's not Christianity. You find out who loves you when the crap hits the fan. You find out who loves you when you're in a foxhole taking fire. That's when you find out. I remember Pastor Daniel once told somebody, I think he told Pastor David Diaz, he said, you see that? You see Brother Rick? He said, he'll go to the mat for you. And he said, go to the mat because, you know, Brother David Diaz was into the UFC stuff and the MMA stuff. So he was using an analogy that he would relate to, that he'd understand. He said he'd go to the mat for you. Meaning I was the type of person as an evangelist or whatever gift I was operating in that I would jump in the hole with you. Oh, you got a problem? Now it's my problem. That was just my personality. But over in this journey, in this trek of faith, even I became hardened. And I have to repent of that. I have to deal with God on that. God's dealing with me on that. Because the love of God that I had for people, He put that in me. But I chose to ignore it. I chose to say, F it. Say it that way, sorry to say. Forget it. We'll say that. Forget it. I want nothing to do with it. These people, they don't listen. They don't respect the man of God. They don't do nothing you tell them. F it. But you all know the journey I've taken because of that. Sometimes we just have to forgive. Some of us have to forgive ourselves. Some of us just have to forgive our angerness at God. Because in the end of all, when all is said and done, not that stupid notion that got me on this tirade, at the end of the day, I hate that. It annoys me. It annoys me just because I'm not like everybody else. And maybe I'm a weirdo or a fruitcake, but I don't want to be like everybody else. I'd rather be a fruitcake for God, a fruitcake for Jesus, and be my own man. That means I die a single man, so be it. I don't care. I don't want to be like everybody else. The children of Israel, they wanted to be like everybody else. They wanted to look like the world. We don't want to be the nuts. Well, the fact that God called them, they weren't like everybody else. They were different. They were a freak. They were a nut. They weren't like the mainstream world. They weren't like the Canaanites or the Amalekites or the Jebusites or any sites. They weren't like them. But God had loved them. He chose them. He selected them. He predestined them. So which one do you want to be? You want to be cool like the rest of the world? Or you want to be a nut for Jesus Christ, if that's what they call you? Oh, you're mean-spirited. Well, God's mean-spirited. If we're mean-spirited by believing in an invisible God that we cannot see, a Jesus Christ that rose from the dead, what's that make us? But unforgiveness eats you up from the inside out, like that nut that used to live with me. I'm not talking about you, Earl. You're cool. You're all right. And on that note, before we get into that, I'm going to be out there Friday. Don't know if you see this. You probably lost your phone under the couch. Hopefully your dog, Brody, it's a cool dog. Hopefully he'll find that phone and you'll get the message. But I need to go to him at Friday. I got to get some tires, get the oil change, and get my car, make sure that it's not going to fall apart on me on my birthday. Those of you that know me know I like to be alone on my birthday. Probably take some kind of crazy road trip or something or whatever it'll be, so I don't want to be stuck on the side of the road on my 50th birthday. I feel like an old man. I am an old man. Actually, I feel pretty young, actually. For my age, I don't feel 50. I don't know if I look 50. Maybe I look 50. Maybe I look 70. Hell, for all I know. But, so yeah, I'll be coming out there. You all keep it in prayer. I might actually get to see a version of the edit of the movie. And at this point, guys, I think I'm just going to, whatever it is, I think I'm just going to call it. It's been 5 years. It shouldn't take 5 years to do a project. It's just crazy to me. You know, Them That Believe took 3 years, and that was forever, but this took longer than that. Johnny Ray Gibbs, I know why. He spent 75 grand on editing. I understand it now. I understand why people's budgets are 100,000 and not 20,000 or 30,000. There's just so much involved. You know, it's my fault a lot of this stuff as far as waiting, because Evangelist Whitney Arsenal, when I made Them That Believe, when I finished it, he pulled me aside and he started speaking to me, and he said, "You need to go to school for editing." And I'm like, "What?" He's all, "You need to go to school for editing. Go to school for," and he was serious about it, and he was adamant about it. Whether he knows it or not, that probably was a prophetic word. Because had I learned how to edit correctly, you know, me and McLean used to edit our videos we did when I had Newco's pictures back in the day in the 90s. We were doing those little videos. And we're doing it on a SEMA editing thing. It's like 2 VHS tapes, and we're controlling the way the picture looked and the sound, and putting our music on it and stuff. And it was cool, but I'm saying, and I like doing it, but you know, that's not actually editing. But Whitney said, "You got to go to school for editing." Well, if I learned how to edit, that's one thing, that's less thing to worry about, because then I could do it myself. Or maybe have someone advise me and do it. And I'm the type of person that if it's my project, I'll just have to sit down, I'll lock myself in a room and just do it. You know, I don't know what it's going to come out like, guys. I mean, if it's, hopefully it'll be watchable. I'm sure it'll be a lot better than The Demonic Dead. My cousin's working on it, and he's good at what he does. So I'm sure it'll be fine. It might not be up to his standards, but it'd probably be up to mine. You know, I'll probably like it. Earl the Challenger, we'll worry about that after the holidays. I start it every day. At least it starts. I can't drive it, but it starts. Sounds good. That's cool, I guess. It's got a $16,000 muscle car that I could rev, and that's about it. But I refuse to drive it till I know every single thing that's wrong with it is fixed. I don't want one error code on it, because I don't feel like breaking down again. It's not the spark plugs. It's the jacked up wiring, a jacked up ground. Earl fixed one of the grounds. It's still probably not grounded correctly. He said there's some more stuff going on, so he will figure it out after the holidays. And then I'll determine whether or not I'm keeping that car or selling it. I haven't decided yet. I almost wish I would have bought the 73 Cuda with the 318. Didn't have to worry about smog. It's more straightforward. That's another thing. I got to pay the tags on that car, and I haven't drove it more than 100 miles. And I just paid the tags on it, and it's, you all know the story. We're not going to get into that. That's not relevant. It's not important to what we're talking about. So, you know, God, Jesus, he requires that we forgive. Not because we want to, not because we feel like it, because he says to. He says to. But you know who is with you when it hits the fan. I've always been a person that has I pretty much figured I would stand alone. Whether that means that I'm going to be martyred alone, hated by the world alone. I find it hard to want to trust or depend on other people. I don't know if that makes it harder for me to trust and depend on God or Jesus. Maybe it does. I don't know. I could talk to you about faith. but I still got to live it out myself. I still got to walk in it myself. That's not always the easiest thing to do. I remember Brother Joey years ago when we used to preach at the Bell Shelter. He says, man, he's like, God gives you a message and you live this message out. Makes sense. That actually makes sense, honestly. I never wanted to be a preacher because I didn't think people could receive crap from me, honestly. Or if they did, they liked hearing me preach once and that was good. They liked it. They didn't want to hear anymore. You know, people don't listen. And I don't know if that's because God's showing me that I don't listen, and maybe He's showing me what it feels like. I don't go out of my way and attempt to not listen to God, but maybe there's something to that. Maybe I got to take a look at that, get on my knees or something. But unforgiveness, that'll just wreck our Christian walk. That'll wreck our relationship with God. I've heard many a sermons on it, many a messages on it, and it's cool. They're good. But maybe I'm just like a shotgun. I just say it how it is. Blam. I don't know, man. I keep telling you I need to do this every week, and I certainly intend to. But sometimes working 14, 16 hours a day for garbage pay makes it a little difficult. And I got other things to take care of around the house here, helping out my mother and around the trailer. The cool thing about the trailer is I dump my storage and I stored everything in here, so that's kind of cool. You just can't see it in this angle, thank God, because it's still a mess. But I did clean it up because Earl had to come over to work on my car and stay the night, so I needed to have a place for him to sleep. We've been on it for the longest time. He that doeth the will of God endures forever. He that doeth the will of God. The will of God is not grinning, not telling everybody that God's going to make you rich, you're going to be a millionaire. But God wants to bless you, sure. But more than He wants to bless you, He wants His will to come to pass. And if that means He has to press His thumb in your back to make it happen, He'll press His thumb in your back. The Bible tells you, God says it. He says it Himself, by His own mouth, by His own word. He says, I kill, I make alive, meaning He's in charge of life and death. God's not a serial killer. He's not getting happy killing people. He's not. But as I've said before, if you get in the way of God's will, He'll take you home. If you're a believer. If you're not a believer, He might just cancel your trip altogether. It's His creation. We cannot say that God does not kill, or we cannot say that God kills. You cannot say any of that because you don't know. You're not God. I'm not God. He can do whatever He wants when He wants to do it, and how He wants to do it. We're like an insect yelling at something that's as powerful to an insect as a human being. In fact, put that on like 10,000 times more. God's merciful because He hasn't killed me yet. I know I tried His patience many times. What makes Him a great God, what makes Him a good and loving God, He does not consume us all with fire when we clearly deserve it. You say, well, there's people, these bad people, they kill other people, they're going to go to hell, this and that. Look, the person who goes along their life without God and without Jesus and their own God, they're going to hell too. You choose to put everything before God and you think you're going in to His kingdom? That is insane. Insane! But He's merciful because He chooses to have mercy on us. He chooses to love us. Look, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to listen to anything I say. Most people don't listen to what I say anyway. That's why I never wanted to be a preacher. Why in the heck would you want to be a preacher? You're about as low as a used car salesman. In fact, used car salesmen are in a greater stature than a preacher these days. You know, in the movies, the preacher's the werewolf. I remember I heard Pastor Daniel preach that, and I was like, Silver Bullet! Because it was Silver Bullet where Everett McGill was the preacher and he was the werewolf. That movie with Corey Haim in the wheelchair. In fact, I met Corey Haim before he died. I liked him. He was cool. You know, I liked him. I was a fan watching him. But when I met him, he was cool. I met him in, I think, 1999. Around the time I met Corey Feldman, he was all right. Corey Feldman was a little more, I don't know, he wasn't as friendly. We'll just say that. I didn't dislike him. I liked him, but he just was like, whatever. Corey Haim he was cool, man. He sat out there and he BS'd with me for a while, and he's like, I'm kicking it with the bouncer at the VU. I was sad when he died, honestly. I was working at the casino with Veronica, and that's when I found out he died. That kind of sucked. But, that really sucked. But, I mean, you never know when your trip's going to be canceled. You never know when God's going to pull the chain. Every day is a gift from God. Every day is a day to serve Him, to do His will. He that does the will of God endures forever. Church history, there's a lot to go into on that. We got to go back. We started to talk about it early on, about the disciples, but then a lot of things happen after in between the disciples in the first century. In that little time period, a lot of stuff was going on. In fact, stuff that Jesus himself prophesied. You'd wish the rocks would fall on you, and the Romans came in and just mashed the heck out of Jerusalem and the Jews. So a lot of things went down. And there was 3 streams going. There was the stream of the wisdom of God, God's protected history, the movement of God's Holy Spirit. Then there was legalism. And there is straight up Gnosticism, and just straight up just bullcrap is the only way to say it. People trying to be God without God. And that's where what we're going to talk about. And that's what we're going to begin to unpack. And that's the message for now, guys. I don't know if there's anything that I talked about that's worth hearing. Hopefully you'll get something out of it. We'll continue this journey of faith. Have a good night.